Good morning, everyone. Dr. Christine here for another interview with one of my awesome practitioners I love getting to talk to. Today we'll be talking to Dr. Rachel Vandenburg, who is a naturopathic doctor. She's been working in women's health for nearly 20 years. Her passion is helping women achieve health through hormonal balance. And alongside her private naturopathic practice, she is the founder of Women's Health Online. And this is where she runs online group-based programs to help women balance their hormones so that they can feel great and live the life they love. So I am going to go ahead and invite her on now. On any minute. So when I've spoken to her about her work, she talks about how she's on a mission to change, the way we look at health and hormones, especially for women in their 30s and 40s. And she'll be talking today about some key myths and truths that she feels like all women should know, which is why I wanted to have her on. And she'll be telling us about an upcoming opportunity as well to achieve hormonal balance in your life. So hi, Dr. Vandenberg. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, thank you so much. Well, it sounds like you just did a fabulous job telling people about me.
I was like hearing it from you though.
Sure. I'm a naturopathic doctor in Ontario. I am also an educator, a mom and a woman in perimenopause. And all of those things I, put together and drove me to create Women's Health Online, which is the way that I gather groups of women together so that we can together in a community explore the role that hormones have in our lives, how hormones affect us so deeply and have such a big impact on the way we look, the way we feel, almost every aspect of our health.
How our brain functions, all the things.
All of it.
Awesome. Well, so tell us a little bit about like your mission and the way that you like to look at health and hormones. Like, what are some of the big changes you think people need to make, or like just like your main things you want people to know?
Sure. Well, my mission is exactly that, to change the way we look at our health and our hormones, especially in this phase of life, generally sort of age 35 to 55, in this time when our hormones are fluctuating dramatically. And I find we just don't give enough credit to the effect that these hormone changes have on the way we feel. We go through all these hormonal phases. We go through puberty. We learn about it in school. Fantastic. We go through pregnancy. There's so much support around that. Also amazing. Then we hit 35-ish. Our hormones are doing a crazy dance. And usually we're also in a point where maybe we've got kids, maybe we're working, hard, working up in a career. Our hormones are all over the place and we don't talk about it much. So I want to change that. I want women to talk about it, and I want women to know that much of the way they think and feel, I mean, you just talked about the brain, the way they look, the way they think, the way they feel, so much of it can be attributed to their hormones.
Totally. And so just because we have a variety of people listening, right? Can you touch on like just how you view the rhythm as you kind of enter your 30s and then maybe starting to hit perimenopause, and then what it means to actually enter menopause, and like what might be happening to some of the hormone fluctuations during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start by sort of getting on the same page with definitions. So menopause is when you haven't had a period for a year. Then we say, okay, you're in menopause. That's the moment of menopause, that 1 year mark. And then after that, that's postmenopause. So menopause is when your reproductive years have ceased. The roughly 10 years leading up to that is a time of hormonal transition that we call perimenopause. And what's happening then is basically our ovaries are slowing down, and that there's more of it looks like month to month. And how that looks then for us in terms of, to really summarize it up, in the beginning of your cycle, you make estrogen. That reaches a point that you ovulate. Ovulation is required to make progesterone. When you're in your perimenopausal years, sometimes you'll make estrogen reach that point and ovulate. Sometimes you won't ovulate. that has a big effect down the road in terms of, did you make progesterone? So when I talk about symptoms that can come up, a big part of what causes symptoms when it comes to hormones is the relationship between those two. So if you have a lot of estrogen and only a little bit of progesterone, it doesn't feel very good. Right? So that's where I use the term balance and say it's all about balance. And I don't want to dive too deep, but those hormones also affect so many other hormones, like your thyroid, which affects your metabolism, the hormones that help you balance your blood sugar, the hormones that help you with your mood and your sleep. And so you can imagine the domino effect. And it's why I use the term fluctuation so much. But if you're going to ovulate some months and not other months, that means you're all over the place in terms of your symptoms. It makes it hard to recognize. It makes it hard to acknowledge what's going on in the background.
So a good question.
Did that answer your question? Yeah.
It did. Yes. Thank you. I always like just giving people like a little physiology review, because I feel like so many times doctors will talk about things without explaining why it's happening.
Right.
And so yeah. I love to explain. I want people to understand their own bodies and their own physiology. Like we should all understand that to the best of our ability. So I love teaching people. But there's a question that popped up in the comments of, how do you know when you're entering these hormonal fluctuations and shifts if you've had a hysterectomy in your 30s?
Great question. Yeah, I was going to say, even if you haven't had a hysterectomy, it can be hard to tell. Mm-hmm. It depends a little bit more about the use of the term hysterectomy. It depends on what actually was removed. So if you don't have a uterus, then you are not going to see changes in bleeding, right? If you don't have, like if you have one ovary instead of two ovaries, or if you don't have two ovaries, that's going to make a difference. If you don't have two ovaries, you probably noticed a big change when that procedure was done. If you have one, you might notice more significantly the variability. It certainly makes it harder. I find in my patients, everyone's unique. Post-hysterectomy, it really complicates it. But because the symptoms, someone's probably looking for an easy answer here, and there isn't one. Because the symptoms can be so vague, right? And so women might start to notice changes in their sleep. I'm just not sleeping so well. And often when we track it out, we realize, it actually happens like in the week before my period. Or my periods are heavier, or they're more frequent, but not always. Or my weight seems to be climbing up and I can't quite figure out why. Or my mood is going down, or I have rough days, but it's not like there's this switch that we're like, oh, if this, then you're in perimenopause, or if this, now we know for sure. There's not even, people like to do blood tests. We can get into that. There's not even a test that says, oh yeah, you're there, or no, you're not. And that's partly because every month is different. Yep.
Well, and for those who have questions about like lab testing and stuff, that's a lot of what Dr. Rachel does, is work with people on these things. And there's a variety of lab tests that you can use to test hormones. So most people will run a blood lab, which is helpful, but it's basically like a snapshot of what's floating around in your blood. Doesn't really tell me about how your hormones are being metabolized or how your cells are utilizing them. So Then there's salivary testing, which is way more informative about how your cells are actually utilizing the hormones that are floating around in your blood. And then there's urinary testing, which tells us about how you're actually metabolizing your hormones and if you're retaining hormones that you're supposed to have excreted and therefore have disrupted levels because of that. So that's where it's really nice to work with a practitioner if you are dealing with, like wanting to get your hormones balanced after a hysterectomy. And if you did have your ovaries removed, then you might be dealing with hormone replacement therapy type stuff. And that's when it's really nice to work with someone who knows this stuff, like Dr. Rachel.
Absolutely.
So I know you also talk about like myths and truths that you want people to know. What would be some of those top ones for you?
Yeah. So one of the top ones is that if you're in your 30s, it can be your hormones. I find women too often, at least the women I see, come to me and they say, well, I was told it can't be my hormones because I'm only 37. Or, like when we do the math on knowing now that this is a 10-year transition, or can be for some women. And we don't know exactly when it starts, and we don't know exactly when it's going to end until in hindsight, right? But for many women, they hit menopause in their late 40s, which means in your 30s, you can very easily be in perimenopause. So I just feel like it's such a disservice, and it means that women are suffering with feeling crummy unnecessarily because and then they're left to think it's in their head, or it's, you know, or it's not really happening because we can't put a name on it or figure out why. And so often when we look then at hormonal balances, I see women feeling better.
So when you are like working with people in your program and working with them on hormonal balance stuff, what would you say is your general approach to that, just to kind of give people an idea of how you like to work?
Sure. I've got two ways that I work with women. So one is, and they're a bit different. In my private practice, we start by what I call putting out fires. So we can look specifically at symptoms, get you feeling better. If your hot flashes are driving you crazy, if you're not sleeping at night, we correct those things. And then we look at all the foundational pieces. And I always say or all the key foundational pieces. These foundational pieces are what allow us to get results that last. So that when you take a supplement, it's landing on a solid foundation and it works. Or when you take herbs or whatever, what I find is, and that those foundational pieces we can do one-on-one in practice if you're in Ontario, but also as part of a group. And that the importance of those pieces is one of the driving forces behind creating a group where I can work with women globally around, these are all the things we can look at around digestion, diet, lifestyle, detoxification, nutrition, making sure all of that is optimal in an educational and community-based way, so that you've got that really solid foundation set.
Awesome. And, you know, for those listening, if you've never participated in a group before, because it sounds scary to do something where you might be talking about your health with other people, I'm actually a really big advocate for groups because it starts to educate you in a different way. And it provides community, which is something that's like completely lacking from healthcare. So, and it lets you know that you're not alone, right? And you just get to listen to all these other people, and they'll probably ask questions that you have that you don't know how to word. And then Dr. Rachel gets to answer them. And then if you have really specific questions or something you don't want to share in the group, then that's when you book a private appointment. And there's a couple kinds of groups. Sometimes they're run more educationally, where it's more oriented towards just teaching you about your body. And then there's some that are run where it's like patients are interacting on a deeper level. And so you can pick kind of what you're comfortable with. And Dr. Vandenburg, is your group patient oriented or education oriented?
So my group is education oriented in that in that way, it can be accessible to people outside of Ontario because I'm only licensed to practice in Ontario. However, there's a coaching component and a community component to it. So we do meet live on Zoom. And that's exactly where we build that community piece, which so many women in the feedback I've gotten say, I signed up for the content and I came away with a community, which was so much more valuable than I could have imagined.
When I've ended my group programs, it's like there's this moment where we're kind of sad. like my thing is going away. So yeah, it can be really fun to join like a community like that. And I know you have some stuff you're going to be doing soon too, right?
I do. So what I'm doing in the spirit of creating community and talking about all of this more is I'm offering a free challenge. So that's happening from October 3 till 7. We'll meet daily. We'll talk about topics just like this. We'll get the chance to dive in a little deeper to talk about some more of the nitty gritty of what's going on in this phase of life. So that, like I said, is free. It's October 3 till 7. I'm rolling out bonus content now. So it's happening on Facebook, and I'm already showing up and laying out bonus content in order to gear up for that week early in October. So I welcome people to sign up now and join this community.
So for anybody watching, that's like 2 weeks from now, right? So
that's 2 weeks from now.
But the one afterwards, you'll have a whole week. So check out her channel.
That's right.
So as we kind of are talking about like this thing that you'll be running, and we were talking about some of the myths and stuff, I guess a good question is like, what are some of the most common questions that pop up for you in these things where you find people are struggling, and what are like some of your thoughts around those?
Yeah. I find they're often, let me think. Yeah. I mean, certainly one question that comes up a lot is around weight. And I like to pick that apart a bit. Maybe that was the wrong use of terms, but I like to explore that and really dive into how our physiology actually changes. And that's why we see changes in our body at this time of life. It's actually another one of the myths that I talk about, that your weight is not your fault. And I won't dive into it too deeply here, but I will say that this is not the time of life where you're meant to eat less and exercise more as a strategy.
So I love educating about people about physiology on my channel. Will you give us like a little taste of some of the physiology around that stuff in the deeper way, just so people can
Sure.
kind of, yeah, because
Yeah.
I think people really like that, you know, they like being taught how their body works instead of just being told what to do. So I love that you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just didn't, I can dive into physiology and talk all day, but
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah,
try me.
just a little
So,
taste before we end.
so here's a taste of what it is with weight. So think about your body when you were maybe a young teen, and your body changed because you started making these hormones, and you put some weight on your butt and on your thighs, and you developed breasts, and everyone kind of knew that was going to happen. At least hopefully most of us did. And it changes again in pregnancy, and it changes again in postpartum, and your hormones fluctuate again in perimenopause and in menopause. And it stands to reason that that means our physiology is going to change. And so the way when our hormone levels, especially our estrogen and progesterone, decline, that means that we redistribute how our body's laid out. So we might put some more weight around our abdomens. And that tends to be where women notice it more, right? So that can be troubling for some. But women really appreciate understanding that this is just physiologically normal. And then there's the piece of, okay, when it comes to hormones, one of the reasons I love talking about them so much is because I do love the physiology, and I like to not like, this is the treatment for that, this is the treatment for that symptom. That's not how it works in the work that we do.
Oh.
I want to get at the root. And the way to get at the root is to get at that physiology. So understanding that also, along with that metabolic shift that happens when your reproductive hormones shift, we also see an effect on your thyroid. And your thyroid affects your metabolism, so that could affect how you carry weight. We see an effect on your blood sugar balance, or we can, on the hormones that balance your blood sugar. We can see an effect on stress hormones and how your body handles stress. And so these are all different places that might be having an impact on the way your body feels and how you look and how you carry your weight. And those are all touch points that we can look at to make a difference.
I love it. Thank you. And I'll kind of give like one more little example, and then we can kind of wrap up. So I love asking practitioners this question, right? Because it helps us understand ourselves in a really different way. And it gives people a picture into like what functional medicine is. I think functional medicine is a super big buzzword right now. Mm-hmm. And there's like a million different ways to do it. And there are some ways people are doing it where I think it's actually closer to the medical model. And then there's some ways that people are doing it where it's a lot more natural and more oriented. And what functional is really referring to is systems. We're looking at systems in the body and how they interact. And that's exactly what she was just talking about. So on some of the videos I've done before, you guys know I talk about like stress a lot and how it interacts with your hormones and your body and your inflammation and your gut and like how all these things are related. And so let's just paint a picture of like a general person that might be interested in Dr. Rachel's course, right? So this is going to be someone, let's just call them like 36, let's say they've maybe had a kid. So now they are dealing with not only the hormone fluctuations that come from pregnancy, but the major hormone fluctuations that happen after pregnancy and like all of the postpartum stuff. And you're probably maybe dealing with a little bit of stress because you just had your first kid. You're also worrying about money. You're probably moving into a bigger house. You might be shifting jobs. So you have all these other things going on in your life. As this stress happens, let's say you maybe also like happened to get an offender bender the other week. No big deal, just a
All
fender
the
bender.
things, pile them on, eh?
But this
All
is like real, this is real life. This is how it happens, right? And then like And then maybe you also, you've been like a CrossFitter for years, and that's just like part of your community, part of your routine, whatever. You're like trying to get back into it. And then you get in that fender bender and you're dealing with the baby and you're not sleeping very well. And then all of a sudden you just start to like have no energy and you just feel off and your curves are changing. And you're like, this is like, I know some of this is postpartum, but like, this is really weird. And then you realize that giving birth is a major injury. And then that actually affects your gut health. And when your gut health gets affected, then you all of a sudden become sensitive to more foods that you maybe weren't sensitive to before. And then this raises your levels of inflammation. Well, your body is also still dealing with breastfeeding and like all of the fluctuations in your neurotransmitters that need to happen for that. So you're dealing with the stress pathways, you're dealing with the hormone changes, you're dealing with the neurotransmitter changes. All of these interrelate. And this is why when we start to address the pillars that she talks about, like energy, sleep, weight and body composition, having PMS stuff, your mood, this is how all of this is related. And so this is why it can be really nice to do some kind of course like this where you get educated about how your physiology is functioning. Because then when you're having a day where you feel off, you don't feel crazy and helpless. You're like, oh, I bet this is happening because Dr. Rachel told me that this can happen with this fluctuation. So today I might actually need to not drink coffee. And so it's like this way of teaching yourself how to sustainably exist in your life without, well, feeling empowered instead of feeling unempowered. So anyway, I love giving like a little avatar like that and a little physiology lesson because I think that's the fun part for people. So I know we're coming up on like the 30-minute mark, and I love to respect your time because I know you're busy. So do you have anything else that you want to share, or like ways that you think is best for people to contact you or follow you or find out about your program?
Yeah, I love how you wrapped that up. I'd maybe just throw in a reminder that small steps can have a significant impact. So this doesn't have to be this, this huge thing that you're committing 5 days to or committing 6 weeks to, or right. And that it can make, small steps have a significant impact. And the sooner the better. I so often hear women say, I wish I knew this earlier. So those two messages. Yes, absolutely. To reach me, we'll be connected below in the caption below this live, right? So people can visit my Instagram, and you'll find in my bio there's a place where you can click to join the challenge or to check out my website. And you can also find my website at womenshealthonline.ca. I'm in Canada, so it's a .ca, Women's Health Online, or you'll find all of that just by hanging out with me on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. And if you guys haven't checked out her Instagram, she has like a bunch of different videos and resources available. So if you just want to explore and get to know her, that's a perfect way to do it. And then you said womenshealthonline.ca, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time and for hosting me. I love chatting with you. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.